I'd like to talk about YEC, Young Earth Creationists, and OEC, Old Earth Creationists.
Want to explore Christian education in a fun way? Check out our board game in the description section below or at welcometotruth.com.
So these are the two main factions of Christians. Both factions exist of people who believe in Jesus, who love the Lord, but one side believes that time elapsed in the Genesis narrative in a certain manner, and another believes that it happened in another manner. Okay, they're not salvific issues, meaning if you believe one side or the other, it's not going to take away your salvation, but they are still important for us to talk about. So, young Earth creationists and old Earth creationists. Young Earth creationism versus old Earth creationism. Let's get into it. Now, young Earth creationists are individuals, Christians, who, when they read the Genesis account of day 1, day 2, day 3, and this is generally seen as Moses is the one who people generally attribute the writing of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, are generally attributed to Moses. Now, so when Moses is writing these down that God created on day 1, day 2, day 3, young Earth creationists believe that Moses is referring, or God is referring to, a 24-hour day, just like we have today. Now, old Earth creationists believe that when in the Genesis chapter 1, when it says that God created on day 1 and day 2, they believe that those are referring to periods of time. So day 1 would be a period of time, day 2 would be a certain period of time. Some believe in longer periods of time, maybe millions of years. Some believe, billions of years. Some believe hundreds of thousands or thousands of years. And here's why old Earth creationists, who are Christians, believe that. The word that is used in Hebrew is yam. Okay, and what yam means is a collection of. So literally, when we read in Genesis chapter 1 on day 1, day 2, that is literally saying on collection 1, on collection 2. So literally, when we're reading the book of Genesis, where it says on day 1, day 2, day 3, that is actually says on collection 1, on collection 2, on collection 3, and so old Earth creationists would say that's a collection of time. There's a collection of time that God is referring to on day 1, and there's another collection of time on day 2 or day 3, etc. So that is the great divide in the Christian church, pretty much. Some people are passionate young Earth creationists, and some people are passionate old Earth creationists. Now, both are Christians. Again, this is not a salvific issue, but it is important to get into. Now, it's important to note that in almost all cases in the Bible where there is a number associated with the word yam, it does refer to a 24-hour period. Now, it's also important to note that Moses lived in, say, around 1450 BC. So either way, even if you're a young Earth creationist or an old Earth creationist, either way, Moses was not there at the beginning. So young Earth creationists would put the date of the universe at, say, around 4000 BC, 4 to 6000 BC, or 8000 BC would be the birth of the universe. But even if they put it at that date, Moses, who was walking around in 1450 BC, was not there at the beginning. So God is showing him these events. Now, old Earth creationists would say that God is showing him, hey, a collection of events that happen. And he's showing him, this is what happened on the first day, or this is what happened on collection 1. This is what happened on collection 2. God creates these things. On collection 3, God creates these things. And old Earth creationists would say that it's not a 24-hour day, a literal 24-hour day, And they would say, well, the sun was created on the fourth day, so, you know, the way that we get our time is by the earth revolving around the sun, right? The earth revolves around the sun in 1 year. This is how we use our time today. This is how we gather our understanding of how much time is passing. But if the sun wasn't created until the fourth day, then old earth creationists would say, what happened in those first 3 days? How did you gauge time in those first 3 days? So some old earth creationists would say that between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, there exists a millions or billions of years in that, between those two verses. And because Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So there it is, it's created. Old earth creationists, some would say that millions of billions of years passed between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, where it says, you know, the earth was without form and void, and the Spirit hovers over the depths of the water, etc. So there are different differences between old earth creationists as well as young earth creationists. You know, the other thing, again, is time. I mean, look at how time is, you know, when Isaac Newton believed that there was a universal clock that ticked throughout the whole universe. And that was absolute time. Well, then Einstein comes along and introduces relativity, and we have quite a different perspective of the universe. You know, that as your speed reaches close to the speed of light, things get very weird and time slows or can even stop. You know, called time dilation. You know, this example is always interesting. Imagine that you are downtown, whatever city you're in, you're downtown and you're staring at a clock tower and it's about to strike 12. And then you blast off in a rocket ship right at that time. You blast off northward, right? And you're looking back at that clock and you say you blast off near the speed of light or at the speed of light. That clock will forever remain, as you're looking back at that, the clock will forever remain where it was at, because the light would never reach you, because you're moving at the speed of light, the new light would never reach you to show you that the clock has turned, so time would actually stand still. Let's take it a little further. So say you blasted off on this rocket ship, say you're with your wife, okay, and you blast off for 50 years heading at the speed of light toward the Andromeda galaxy. So you blast off for 50 years heading at the speed of light, and then, you know, you and your wife, you conceive children on that spaceship, again, just go with me in the analogy. And those children start to grow up, right? In the 50 years that you're heading toward the Andromeda galaxy. And those children say, hey, you remember that green and blue planet you always tell us about? We want to go back to that. So you were heading 50 years in one direction, and let's say at that point you start heading 50 years in the opposite direction, back toward Earth. Again, at the speed of light. Now for you, on the spaceship, it would have been how much time passed? 100 years, right? 50 years one way, 50 years the other way. 100 years would have passed for you. But as you get back to the planet that you left, Earth, millions of years have passed. Okay? And again, this is time dilation. The speed of time literally slows down and or stops as you enter higher speeds or larger gravity. So that's all I'm going to say about that. If you want a good movie to, you know, check out that kind of goes around that, check out Interstellar. That's always a fun one that talks about time dilation. Let's just use another analogy. Not that this is happening, but imagine, right, we're moving around, the Earth is moving around the sun at a certain speed, okay? And then over here in the other part of the universe, say God was, not that this is happening, okay, don't cry heresy, but say God was on another planet, and that planet was moving at the speed of light, round, really, really fast. Again, not that that's happening, but the experience of time that these two planets experience time would be very different. God moving at a faster velocity, time would slow down much slower to him than to us moving on the earth. Okay? And to the point where 6 days of him moving at a certain speed very fast could equate to millions of years of us moving at the sun. Again, I'm not saying that that's what is happening, but those things have to be taken into account as well, as far as how time it can be measured. Now, in this analogy, it would be correct to say, from God's perspective, if he was moving around at the speed of light, right, that he only moved 6 days. And it would also be correct, as we revolve around the sun, that the time that had passed for us would be, say, millions of years. So, again, without getting too much into the weeds on it, but just know that time, that there is something called time dilation. Time does move different at different parts in the universe, based upon the velocity, based upon gravity. And so that's something that needs to be considered as well. Now, when I first heard, as a Christian, people saying that the universe was more than, say, 6,000 to 10,000 years old, I cried heresy, right? I thought they were being heretical by saying that, but again, I didn't know that the word yom means a collection of time, and some of these other factors that we're going to go over. So where did the young Earth model come from? Where did the idea that the universe is 6,000 to 10,000 years come from? Is that something that a pope spoke one day? Well, here's what happened. Bishop Ussher, I think I pronounced that right, he added up all of the genealogies and all of the different dates, and that's what he came to. He came to a date of October 27th, 4004 BC as the beginning of creation. Now, young Earth creationists would accuse old Earth creationists of just catering to the scientific discoveries of our time, right? So Charles Darwin, Darwinian evolution. Charles Darwin came out with the book On the Origin of Species in 1859 and began to say that the universe was very old, although others had said that before him. So was this the first time that came up, that the universe was, very old? And are Christians, old Earth creationist Christians, just following in the scientific discoveries? Well, not so fast. So if you go to the 4th century AD, Augustine was one of the first ones who began to question a 24-hour period. Augustine was minimally kind of questioning whether they were longer periods of time. You have Isaac Newton, okay, one of the founders in science. He was also a devout Christian. He loved the Lord Jesus with all his heart, all his soul, all his mind. And he lived in the 17th century, which was far before the 19th century of Charles Darwin. He also thought they were longer intervals of time, and he loved the Lord. So it's not something that necessarily just happened after Darwin came out with Darwinian evolution. So again, young Earth creationists believe that the Genesis account, Genesis chapter 1, is referring to 6 24-hour days, and that the universe is, say, 6,000 to 10,000 years old. Old Earth creationists believe that it is older than that. And the reason I don't specify billions of years old, or some people believe it's millions of years old, or billions of years old, or hundreds of thousands of years old, or some would say maybe tens of thousands of years old. But either way, they believe that Moses, again recording in say 1450 BC, was recording events that happened in the past. Whether you're a young earth or an old earth creationist, God was showing Moses events that occurred in the past. Now whether that was a few thousand years ago or whether it was the distant past, both are on the same ground in that standing. Now, of course, God could have created the universe in 6 days. He could have created it in 6 seconds, right? God is God. But the reason it is important is because we're trying to see what actually did happen. What does the Genesis account tell us? What do other books in the Old Testament tell us as well in regards to the creation of the universe? Now, I think it's also important to differentiate between old earth creationists and theistic evolutionists. And if you want a good book on the difference between the two, although it is a doorstop, I would recommend Theistic Evolution, a critique of it, which came out in 2017 by Stephen Meyer and J.P. Moreland and some other authors. It took me a while to read that book, but it is definitely worth its weight. But theistic evolutionists believe that God created at the beginning, but by using evolution. So theistic evolutionists believe that man still evolved from the lower primates, chimpanzees, and that those evolved from lesser animals, and if you go far back enough, you finally get to a single-celled amoeba. If you're a theistic evolutionist, then you still have man evolving from an ape, as opposed to old earth creationists, which believe that God created man at a later time than he created, say, the other animals and the primates. Okay, so man did not evolve from those animals, but God created man and women, especially after those animals were created. Now, all of cosmology and basically geology seem to point to an old Earth model. So, you know, they would point to the stars in the sky and say something like, hey, you know, the fact that you're even seeing those stars took, you know, millions of years or billions of years for that light to even reach us. Young Earth creationists would say, well, no, God created the universe with the appearance of age, just as he created Adam and Eve with the appearance of age as adults. He didn't create them as little babies, right? He created Adam and Eve as adults. And so in the same way he created the universe, this is what young Earth creationists would say, he created the universe with the appearance of age so that we could see the beauty of the heavens, the beauty of the stars, you know, and not have to wait millions or billions of years in order to see that. Young Earth creationists would also point to problems with carbon dating or problems with radiometric dating. You know, they would point to certain studies that of trees, you know, of a tree that has been through, say, a hurricane, and they would carbon date that tree, and the tree was just planted maybe a couple years ago, and it would show that the tree was millions of years old or something, because that tree had been through a tumultuous event. And they would, young Earth creationists would point to the flood, right, the worldwide flood, as that tumultuous event that, you know, caused things to seem older than they actually were. Young Earth creationists would also point to, you know, problems with carbon dating, you know, that, you know, there's a certain amount of carbon-12 or carbon-14, and that's what we're using to measure carbon dating on. But if you had crazy things happen in the past, like the Industrial, you know, Revolution, or, you know, atomic bombs being dropped, that would change the amount of carbon-12 or carbon-14 that there is. And so they would point, you know, old Earth creationists would point to radiometric dating and carbon dating, and young Earth creationists will say, well, yeah, but there's problems with those. And so that's where, again, the tension comes in between the two sides. So where do we stand at Welcome to Truth? Well, I really don't know. I'm not positive in one direction or the other. I mean, I think we probably tend to lean old Earth, just based on geology and cosmology. But I'm very interested in hearing the case for young Earth as well. I'm very interested in hearing their evidence as well. Could God have, like I said, could God have created it in 6 days? Yes, absolutely. I think he definitely could have. He created it out of nothing. So could he have done it in 6 days? Sure. Is that what happened? I don't know. But we do know that God is the creator, and we know that we did not evolve from monkeys, that God created us with a certain divine purpose in his own image. I would say again that it's important that we do not demonize one another, each of these sides. You know, we're still figuring these things out. And I think it's important for us to be able to listen to both of these sides and to hear the different arguments and to argue them out and let the best argument win, but understand the entire time that this other side are still people who love the Lord Jesus and who believe in Jesus as their personal Savior. And so we can work these things out and figure them out, but we should not demonize the other side as heretical or as demonic.
As these videos take hours and hours to make, boost my energy up by buying me a coffee in the description section of this video. Thanks so much.
And if you want to make educational videos like this, check out the Pictory link below in the description section. We'll see you in that video over there.